Pakistan have long been iron friends and all-weather partners of strategic cooperation. China has also been Pakistan's largest trading partner for 4 years in a row. However, Pakistan's trade deficit with China, which accounts for over 30% of the country's overall trade deficit, further widened last year. How is Pakistan using its Guest of Honor status at the first China International Import Expo to explore opportunities in the Chinese market and to overcome the trade imbalance between the two sides? I'm pleased to be joined by His Excellency Asad Umar, the Finance Minister of Pakistan. Mr. Umar, thank you very much for accepting our interview.
Most welcome. As
one of the 12 Guests of Honor, what has Pakistan prepared for the very first China International Import Expo?
Well, there's a big Pakistani delegation here. We've got almost 75 companies which are either already exporting into China or some of the prospective exporters who are here. We've got a big pavilion. So both the government as well as the private sector is here in significant strength because it's a unique opportunity. We were discussing this evening. It's probably the first import expo in the world. Countries hold export expos. This is the first time a country is holding an import expo.
Well, I understand that Pakistan has prepared a wide variety of products such as textile or leather goods or sports goods, surgical equipment. How would you describe the competitiveness of Pakistani exports in the global market?
For some of these products that you have just mentioned, Pakistan is considered either the global leader or amongst the leaders. Sporting goods, the most famous thing which everybody in the world recognizes, of course, is the biggest sporting event in the world, which is the World Cup football. And for many, many years now, the World Cup football is played by footballs made in Pakistan. And in different sports also, there's really world-class products which come out of Pakistan. Surgical goods, outstanding products which come in. Textile is the biggest export of Pakistan. Generally, when big textile expositions take place, the Pakistani pavilion is called the home of home textiles. So particularly in home textile, it's very, very big. It's big in denim. People around the world like jeans these days. Even the Chinese wear a lot of jeans, so a lot of denim manufacturing taking place there. It's a variety of industries where Pakistan has got globally competitive products.
However, when we look at the volume of trade or the balance of trade, it seems that there's a lot to be worked on. For instance, in the fiscal year ending in 2018, the overall trade deficit of Pakistan stands at some $37.7 billion and about over 30% coming with China, meaning Pakistan's trade deficit with China stood at $9.7 billion, if I'm correct. So how does Pakistan see the reasons behind such a huge trade deficit with China and that it has been expanding as well over the past years? What has been the impact of such widening deficit?
Okay. Actually, the trade deficit with China is probably even a little bit more than that. But that's not China's fault, and mostly this increase in trade deficit that you talked about is actually because of something good. There has been a lot of investment in Pakistan under the framework of the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, and there's almost 10,000 megawatts of power projects which have been set up, and these investments have led to machinery imports into Pakistan from China, and that has increased the trade deficit. Pakistan has traditionally not been an export-oriented economy. That's our experience. Our growth trajectory has been somewhat different from what the East Asian countries, including what China has gone through, where there has been a very, very strong export focus. And that's something that the new government is trying to change. Clearly, the East Asian strategy of the last 50 to 60 years has worked. It's lifted more people out of poverty than ever in human history. And therefore, we'll be making a very conscious effort to diversifying our export base and putting much greater focus on exports rather than domestic consumption.
I understand that China and Pakistan are also negotiating phase 2 of the free trade agreement between these two sides so that they can boost trade and boost mutual investment probably. And I understand that 10 rounds of negotiations have been held. Where are we in terms of progress? Is there any likelihood, is there any chance that the agreement can be reached before the end of 2018?
Before the end of 2018 might be difficult, but that's again, as I said, was one of the major points that was discussed in the meetings with the Chinese leadership. In fact, there is a follow-up meeting which will be taking place next week, as early as next week. So the fresh discussion or resumption of the FTA dialogue will take place starting in the next week or so. The target is by April, when the next round summit takes place. Before that, we should have concluded it. There is interest in it from both sides. Both Pakistan and China want to conclude it and move towards an even more deeper economic engagement between Pakistan and China to take full advantage of the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, which is probably the flagship Belt Road Initiative project right now. And we want to showcase it for the world to show the benefits of this relationship.
Well, the CPEC projects have also been used as an example by some in the world as China's debt diplomacy, trying to gain influence in other countries through this kind of quasi-economic activity. Most recently, even a US leader accused China of playing debt diplomacy in the world and trying to gain its influence. So I want to ask you what kind of concrete benefits, tangible things that the CPEC projects has brought to Pakistan, and what are the obstacles the two countries are looking at to overcome in the near future?
You're absolutely right, and I've been hearing some fantastic claims. In fact, soon after the elections had taken place in Pakistan, the government had not yet been formed. Mr. Pompeo, the Secretary of State of the US, gave a statement talking about Pakistan's China debt problem. And I wasn't yet sworn in as a minister, but it was widely understood that I will be the incoming finance minister. So I had to respond, and I had to say,
what did you say?
That Pakistan has a debt problem for sure, but Pakistan does not have a China debt problem. And I suggested in a friendly manner to Mr. Pompeo that he should worry about his China debt problem rather than worry about Pakistan's, because the US owes China $1.3 trillion. China is the biggest lender in the world to the US. The whole idea of CPEC being some kind of a sinister plan by China to cause economic problems to Pakistan is absolute nonsense. It's an example of cooperation between two countries which is in the benefit of both sides. It's not just in Pakistan's interest or in China's interest.
But really give us some examples.
So specifically,
yeah, some numbers,
what is Pakistan's big problem? Pakistan's big problem is we have very low savings rate and therefore not enough capital to invest in the development needs of the country, right? And specifically, one of the problems that we were facing was severe shortages of electricity. About 2/3 or a bit more than that of the total CPEC investment went into the power generation sector. So Pakistan got the capital that it needed, the finances that it needed to set up this power generation capacity. China, on the other hand, has surplus capital and it wants to deploy that capital in the rest of the world. So it got very good returns, handsome returns for the capital which it deployed under the CPEC umbrella in Pakistan. And of course the Chinese high-tech products got exported into the country, into Pakistan. So both sides gain from it, and this is just the cooperation that that you would want to see between two countries.
Well, just now you were talking about the debt problem being not a China debt problem, but an overall debt problem. However, by the second quarter of 2018, the external debt of Pakistan increased to $95.1 billion US. So could you break it down roughly to us? How much of it is owed to China and how much of the burden is it really to Pakistan?
Okay, the country debt, the government-to-government debt of Pakistan that it owes to China is less than 10% of this total, and it's about 10% of the total public debt that Pakistan owes. So 90% of the public debt that Pakistan owes is owed to countries other than China, either to multilateral institutions or other bilateral lenders. So as a total portfolio of Pakistan's public debt, China debt is, as I said, barely about $1 out of $10. So it's not a very, very significant number. And the issue is the problem that Pakistan faces actually is not even that the debt is very big. Because if you look at our total debt as a percentage of our GDP, it's high, but it's manageable. The big problem for Pakistan, the reason why debt sustainability is a problem in Pakistan is we don't have enough exports. We just are not generating enough foreign currency inflows to be able to service this debt, and that's a fundamental problem.
Pakistani goods need to be competitive, right? You are competing with goods from all over the world. Although we are iron brothers, but the consumers ultimately will pick the products based on their merit. So what are some of the things that Pakistan is doing with the help of China to really boost export from Pakistan?
If you break it down into like 2 or 3 critical elements, one is infrastructure. You need infrastructure to have high productivity capacity to produce competitive goods, right? And that's what CPEC first phase was about. It was all about infrastructure, power generation, road networks, ports. The second element is the skill level of the workers in the country. Productivity levels will determine your competitiveness. And Pakistan has made that a priority. It's, if you know a little bit about the political party that I belong to, it was all about youth orientation. And getting the right skills for the youth is really one of the highest priorities. And even in that, China is now partnering Pakistan. And the expansion of the CPEC framework, which is taking place right now, an MOU got signed yesterday, which is about socio-economic development. So we are even looking at partnership and skill development transfer. And then the macroeconomic policy reorientation that I talked about, putting all those factors together. Pakistani workers are hardworking. They go all over the world. Half of Middle East has been built by Pakistani workers. Even the intellectual talent of Pakistan, in the best universities in the world, the top companies, corporations of the world, you'll find Pakistanis there. It's just providing them the right environment, the right policy mix in Pakistan, and they'll produce goods which people in Shanghai would want to buy.
Well, just now you talked about the first phase of the CPEC, and actually your new Prime Minister Imran Khan, before he visited China, he was talking about a new phase of the CPEC project. He was talking about inviting more Chinese investment and creating special economic zones. So would you want to elaborate a little bit more on that, and what can we expect in terms of bilateral ties of this new phase?
Yeah. As I said, the first phase was about infrastructure. That was the priority for the first phase. The next phase is all about now converting this CPEC, which is the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, into a true economic corridor, which means it's about industrial growth, agriculture, trade. So the focus of the next round is all going to be about getting our agriculture more productive, creating agricultural surpluses, making our industry more competitive, particularly export-oriented industry, and using the special economic zones to export out of Pakistan to anywhere else, to anywhere in the world, but particularly also to China. So that's the next phase. And what people are going to see in Pakistan as a result of this is very significant job creation and significant export acceleration. The 2 biggest objectives for the current government are exactly these objectives. Job creation, employment opportunities for the youth, as well as export growth. And CPEC partnership is now moving towards exactly that direction.
Thank you very much. We're going to leave it there. The Finance Minister of Pakistan, Your Excellency Asad Umar. Thank you very much.
Most welcome. Thank you.
The first ever China International Import Expo, or CIIE, is being held in Shanghai from November the 5th to the 10th. Poland, one of China's most significant partners among Central and Eastern European countries, has brought a delegation of 80 companies to join the expo, setting a record for the number of Polish companies participating in an overseas exhibition. Why is Poland paying such attention to the Chinese market? How can the CIIE promote trade between the two sides? And what distinct opportunities can the two countries offer each other? I'm pleased to be joined by Grzegorz Kolodko, a distinguished professor and former Polish Deputy Premier and Minister of Commerce. Thank you very much for accepting our interview. Chinese President Xi Jinping delivered a keynote speech at the opening ceremony of the first China International Import Expo. What was the biggest message that you took away from that speech?
The biggest message was that globalization is irreversible. It must and it will continue, but it will be somehow different globalization that it's been so far. This time it's supposed to be inclusive globalization. As President Xi puts it, win-win. and hopefully it is going to be so. Yet it's still a very big challenge, not only for China, but I would say even much more for different parts of the world. So I'm not surprised by what President Xi said today. That is what I was personally expected, without going into the detail of the accents. But I think it's very important, because that was the message not only to us here, that was the message to the world, and that was the message sent by the Chinese leader at the beginning of November. And at the end of November there is the summit of group of 20 countries, actually 19 countries in the European Union, so-called G20 in Buenos Aires in Argentina. And many nations, many businessmen, policymakers, researchers are looking forward for reinstitutionalization of globalization, and for that reason it's so important what and by what words has been said by President Xi today.
Well, the theme of the Hongqiao International Economic and Trade Forum, which is part of the International Import Expo, is spurring new vitality of global trade, creating an open and win-win scenario. What are the factors that you think can help to spur new vitality?
This win-win, you know, it's nice two words. Somebody is joking that some people in China believe that it's an old Chinese saying, but that is a counterpoint to neoliberalism and neoliberal globalization, which wasn't win-win, but actually was much more on the behalf of enriching the few at the cost of many. And now both the developing countries, as I refer to them, emancipating economies, and responsible people, accountable policymakers and intellectuals in developed countries are looking for more balanced trade and more balanced economies all over the world. And what we heard from President Xi and what we discussed at the forum, at the symposium during this great event here in Shanghai, is a quest for escape for work, because definitely neither the business as usual along the line of neoliberalism, which one more time enriches the few at the cost of many, or the surgence of waves of nationalism, new nationalism. This is not a good answer for the challenges of the future. So maybe this inclusive globalization, or if you wish I may say globalization with Chinese characteristics, will be a positive proposition.
Are you seeing the International Import Expo being a platform for the inclusive globalization that you just talked about?
Well, definitely, yes. You know, I'm coming from Poland, which is, from China's perspective, small country. We take a part in the New Silk Road, Belt and Road Initiative. There is also the program which is called Belt and Road, and within it there is 16+1. Poland is the biggest country in East Central Europe. And we have also a very big trade deficit. We import from China much more than so far we were able to export to your great market. So for our businessmen, for our real and potential exporters, this is another opportunity here in Shanghai to present the result of work of our hands and mostly minds in a competitive way. President Xi visited Poland, Polish President and Prime Minister visited China. I'm coming to China pretty often. This is my third visit this year. So I think that such a forum like this and the Expo is a good occasion not only to exchange the views, but first of all, show what you have. You want to trade, okay, be competitive, show that it is a good quality and the price is acceptable and so on. So I believe that this is important, because now China shows that China is ready to import much more than so far. And there are the countries, as you know, starting from United States with a very big trade deficit, and they're supposed to look very carefully how much is possible to place on the Chinese market.
Would you want to give some examples what China can share? You say China's new...
What I'm telling my students, what I'm writing in my papers, in my books, when I'm referring to China, the main thesis is that nobody as good as China in the long run was able to combine the power of invisible hand of market with the power of the visible hand of the government. There is not such thing like a free economy. Economy market must be regulated. Sometimes China overshot, sometimes there is overregulation, there is a little bit too much of bureaucracy, wrong intervention. But the recipe for the future, and this is also the core of my new pragmatism, is a proper synergy between market and government, state interventionism and spontaneous forces of business, and this time on the global scale. And here China has to propose much more than anybody else.
Well, I would say many people would say this is the wrong direction to go, and this is where China need to come back from too much intervention by the state in the economy. For instance, the Americans are accusing China of state capitalism, and you are actually saying a little bit of state capitalism is not a bad thing.
Isn't it strange that the Americans are accusing China of some sins and mistakes, and China is recently not accusing Americans for very many mistakes which have been and are committing over there? Well, I'm not saying that China is perfect, far from that. Sometimes, somewhere there is too much of government intervention, sometimes, somewhere it's supposed to be improved, but one more time, a proper combination of interventionism and the government and state property and free market entrepreneurship, this is the answer. So in my newest book, which is called In Provocative Way, Will China Save the World? I'm raising one more time what system we have in China. Is it socialism or capitalism? Because definitely this is the market economy, yet not of Western type. And I'm coming with a new proposal. I'm not sure how great a career this world will make. I'm calling the system you have here Chinism. It's neither capitalism nor communism. It is a Chinism. It is a very specific system, but first of all, it does deliver. And what is the most important for people in South Asia, in post-Soviet Republic, in lagging behind Africa, Middle East, and Latin America, and even for some in Eastern Europe, it is that China's economic system does work much better than the alternative systems. So for that reason, there is a lot to be learned from China's accomplishments.
Let's talk a little bit about Poland's position, especially when it comes to its relationship with the European Union vis-à-vis its relationship with China. Now, it's one of 11 countries among the 16 Eastern European countries that are also EU members, and Poland is the largest recipient of EU structural and investment funds, which will stop in 2020. Does that pose complication for Poland in terms of working with China? How are you managing these two relations at the same time?
I'm not happy that the Polish representative, the political one, is not so strong at this summit, at this expo. Our Prime Minister or presidents are not here. And
what are their concerns?
There are some presidents and prime ministers from the 16 countries which take part in Belt and Road Initiative. But our economic relations are improving, our political relations, I mean Poland, China, are the good one. But you mentioned the structural funds from the European Union. You have to be aware that we are not a poor country anymore. Polish GDP per capita on purchasing power parity is, say, 75% higher than in China, or from other perspective, this is 50%, half of US, or 75% of the EU average, and it is growing this year, not pace of China, but 5%, which is the highest rate of growth in Europe. So we have to, looking forward after 2020, count much more on our savings. We have to raise propensity to save, to invest more, and here China comes to the fore. We are looking forward for increment of China injection of capital and investment and so on, and there are some projects being considered within the 16+1. As you pointed, 5 are still countries not yet the members of the European Union, but I think that they will be by the end of the next decade. What I'm not, as an economist, as a researcher, what I'm not satisfied, happy about, there's some bad blood, you know, between Brussels, Warsaw, and some other East European capitals and Beijing. There are some suspicions in Brussels that China is coming to Eastern Europe, which is supposed to be the domain of European Union.
Yeah,
first
China
of
is
all,
driving
Germany.
a wedge
yeah, France.
How do you say
If I was in my previous shoes, when I was 4 times Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Finance, I would just make, you know, a working group of Brussels bureaucracy from the European Union, the policymakers from East Central European countries and from Chinese government, and I would work out how we can work together to invest in upgrading infrastructure using China's technology, China's companies, China's capital, and how to combine it with the funds coming from the European Union. Instead of competing, I would rather manage, you know, cooperating, and that is very much along the line of yours, Chinese, win-win. Also here you can apply win-win instead of one takes all, trying to be the winner.
This year actually marks the 40 years of China's reform and opening up, and you visited China. Of course, you started to deal with China when you were Deputy Premier and Finance Minister during the 1990s. What have you witnessed over the course of the past several decades?
It's so impressive, you know. Still some people cannot believe how much China has accomplished over this 40 years. We are being considered, they refer to myself as one of the key architects of Polish economic success, but it's a little bit if compared to China. Quite recently I hosted your ambassador to Warsaw, Mr. Liu Guangyan, and there was the conference how China will change the world. So these reforms, the path of China, has proved that if you know where you are going and you are committed and you are learning by doing, you are successful. What I'm saying, coming to China since 1989, that I never was asked a question too early or too late. Always my Chinese colleagues in the government, in the media, in the science and research, they were asking a correct question at the correct time, and this process of learning by doing, also from the experiences of the others, what works and why, and what is not working and why, is a tremendous one. So that is one reason China does reserve respect and supposed to be followed to some extent by some other countries.
Okay, thank you very much. We have to leave it there. Professor Kolodko, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me here.
And that is it for this edition of The Point with me, Li Xin. As always, you can follow me on Facebook and Twitter using the handle The Point with LX. Download the application called CGTN to watch the show on your mobile devices, or go to YouTube and look for CGTN The Point. Thanks for watching. You've got The Point.